Now it's time to take stock. One of the striking results of this summary of the gospel so far, 8 defining words, 5 clarifying sentences, all emerging from one chapter of the New Testament, is how cognitive the gospel is. It's striking. Here is what is to be understood, believed, obeyed. Here is what is promised, taught, explained. All of this must be said loudly and repeatedly in a generation that feels slightly embarrassed when it has to deal with the cognitive and the propositional. Yet something else must also be said. This chapter comes at the end of a book that repeatedly shows how the gospel rightly works out in the massive transformation of attitudes, morals, relationships, cultural interactions. As everyone knows, Calvin insists that justification is by faith alone, but genuine faith is never alone. We might add that the gospel focuses on a message of what God has done and is doing and must be cast in cognitive truths to be believed and obeyed. But this gospel is never properly the gospel if it remains exclusively cognitive. Thus, in the first 2 chapters of 1 Corinthians, the gospel, the word of the cross, is not only God's wisdom which the world judges to be folly, but it is God's power which the world judges to be weakness. The first 4 chapters find Paul pained at the divisions in the Corinthian church, different factions associating themselves exclusively with one hero or another. I am of Peter, I am of Apollos, I am of Paul, and the most sanctimonious of the lot, I am of Christ. What the apostle works out is how this is a betrayal of the gospel, a misunderstanding of the nature of Christian leadership, a tragic and bitter diminution of the exclusive place of Christ, the crucified Christ, who is the focus of the gospel. Chapter 4 shows in a spectacular way that there is no place for triumphalism in the church of the blood-bought, in the church led by apostles who eat everyone's dirt at the end of the procession. In chapters 5 and 6, the gospel of Christ, the Passover lamb, prescribes that believers must, in line with Passover, get rid of all yeast. And this works out in terms of church discipline, where there is grievous sexual sin. Where the gospel triumphs, relationships are transformed, with the result that lawsuits bringing brothers into conflict with each other before pagan courts becomes almost unthinkable, and casual sex is recognized as a massive denial of Christ's lordship. In chapter 7, complex questions about divorce and remarriage are worked out in the context of the priorities of the gospel and the transformed vision brought about by the dawning of the eschatological age and the anticipation of the end.